First Samuel chapter 19. So, by way of recap, Goliath is dead. David is given a permanent spot in Saul's court. He's given a military commission, and he's given the king's daughter, he offered the king's daughter's hand in marriage. But Saul is not a happy camper. Now, being an unhappy camper can take on several forms. You can be frustrated, you can be disappointed, you can be discontented. But in the case of Saul, Saul was angry. Did you ever get a song stuck in your head? Well, sometimes I get a song stuck in my head. My head's been polluted from about 20 years of rock and roll before I got saved. But I try to come back, and Victory in Jesus is my comeback song. And for Saul, the song stuck in his head was, Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his 10,000s. It must have been a popular hit because we'll not get there this week, but the Philistine generals had that song stuck in their heads as well. Anger is destructive, and it goes beyond the object of the anger, and it goes beyond the subject of the anger. Let's see what anger had done to Saul and the people that were around him. First of all, he curses his wife. Now, modern equivalent of that would be SOB, but he talks to his son, and he says to his son, "You son of a perverse rebellion woman." I don't know if she was in the room at the time, but I don't think she'd appreciate that. Anger causes Saul to swear and lie to Jonathan, and Jonathan testified to David. He says, anything big or small, Dad and I talk about it. So he's alienated his son. He causes his daughter Michal to lie and causes her to throw her husband under the bus, even though the Bible says that Michal loved David. It causes Jonathan to lie. It causes David to lie. There's an attempted murder on Jonathan, all this stuff because of anger. There's an attempted murder on David, and there's an actual murder on Ahimelech and 84 other priests. This thing is just totally out of control. And then anger leads to Saul's ultimate destruction. I'm convinced that anywhere along that line, he could have fallen on his face and say, God, I'm sorry. Now, he already lost the kingdom, but he could have been a great aid to David if that transition took place, but Saul never did that. So Saul tries to kill David. This is Samuel chapter 19. And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. I mentioned to you last week, there are some little words that are starting to jump off the page more these days. But, therefore, since, because. So who was Jonathan? You know, I have this thing for looking up these names and trying to understand what they mean and how the name itself relates to the story. But we've never really expanded on the name Jonathan, although he's been in the narrative several times already. First of all, the name Jonathan means given of God. So Jonathan was given to Saul as his oldest son. He was given to Saul as a vehicle of praise. Jonathan did all the battling and all the victories, but Saul got the praise. He was given to David as a friend and as a confidant, and ultimately he was given to Mephibosheth as a posthumous protector. Jonathan is going to realize that the kingdom is gone. David is going to be the next king. In the culture of the day, the thing was that the new regime would kill off all the males of the old regime so there would be no challenge for the new administration, the new regime. And so Jonathan is saying, if I live, would you spare my life? And would you spare the life of my kids? So, given of God. So let's take a look of who this guy Jonathan was. So first of all, he was introduced as a valiant, fearless warrior, and we covered the scriptures in the past. That backs to chapter 13. Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistines that was at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. He was not just a warrior, which would be an individual contributor. He was also a leader of men, and we covered this also. 3,000 men, 2,000 were led by Saul, and 1,000 were led by Jonathan. Now, what you need to be a leader is to have some followers. And then Saul and Jonathan were the only ones with a weapon, and yet 1,000 men stuck in there with Jonathan. He was humble. Jonathan went, and he was the one that defeated that garrison. He was the one through whom God established thunder and earthquakes and wiped out a great number of the Philistines. But yet he was humble enough when Saul was given the credit. He didn't come up and say, "Hey, Saul, you were hiding out in that cave. I was the guy who did it." He didn't say that. He was submissive to his dad. His dad made a foolish vow and said, "Whoever eats anything between now and dusk, we're going to kill him." So Jonathan didn't hear the vow. He comes back in, and Saul says to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done." And Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that was in my hand. Here I am. I will die." He was submissive to his dad. He gained and kept the trust and respect of his armor bearer to the death. You know, it takes an amount of time, an amount of episodes to gain somebody's trust, to gain somebody's respect. But one idle word or one misstep, and you can lose all that. Never happened to Jonathan. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I'm with you, heart and soul." Jonathan saw the good in other people. For David took his life in his hand. He's defending David to his dad, Saul. David took his life in his hand and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood? He was faithful to his dad. I already mentioned he was submissive to his dad, but he was also faithful to his dad until death. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. What a name, Jonathan. He was generous. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. And he provided for his family even after death. And I mentioned already that he realized David was going to be the king. And he said, "If I'm still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever," my kids, "when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." Most of all, Jonathan was a best friend forever, a BFF. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own. Of course, the cartoon is, I'm going to be your friend forever. Just wait and see. Forever. So Saul tries to kill David, and Jonathan is betwixt and between. He has allegiance going in both directions, and he has discernment to understand who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, "Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you." And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you." We've read that verse already. And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore. One of the offshoots of that anger was Saul was going to swear and lie to his son. As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. There's a little interlude in here. There are bigger fish to fry. David is with Saul. Saul wants to kill David, but the enemy is on us. And so there was war again. And David went out, left the presence of Saul, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow so that they fled before him. That's an amplification of Saul killed his thousands and David killed his 10,000s. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre. Now, for the longest time when I've read this passage and I thought about it, I'm picturing Saul on one end of this throne room and David on the other end of the throne room, and Saul gets upset and he throws the javelin. I've said that word specifically, and David moves to his side. But when I was studying Goliath, I noticed that Goliath had both a javelin and a spear. So I had to look up javelin versus spear. Now, the javelin is something that you throw. If you go to a track and field meet, you see them taking that thing and they throw that javelin. The spear is something much heavier, and it's really used in hand-to-hand combat. Picture a bayonet on a rifle without the rifle. You don't throw your rifle, you use it in hand-to-hand combat. And so David is right next to Saul. Saul's sitting there holding on to his spear, holding on to his bayonet without bullets. The song is stuck in his head. David killed his 10,000s, and David is sitting there plucking on his guitar, trying to give him some peaceful psalms. David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear. So they were within arm plus tip reach. David must have had the reflexes of a cat. Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Yes, sir. Spirit from the Lord? Well, that's a great question. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about that, and we mentioned that in the first chapter of Job, that harmful spirit, Satan himself, came from the Lord with the Lord's permission. We also mentioned the time when Ahab, the king of the north, and Jehoshaphat, the king of the south, were talking about battling the next day against Sennacherib, I believe it was. And God's plan was to get rid of Ahab. And so the Bible in that throne room of God talks about this spirit that goes to the Lord and says, I can get Ahab to go to that battle. I will go into those false prophets and have them speak a lie. And so there is a false, wicked spirit that came from the Lord. You good with that? Okay. There we're going to see once again ABC's Wide World of Sports, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. But now David is going to be going through a parabola simultaneously. He's going to be going through the downside and the upside simultaneously. In the downside, we're going to see how all his crutches, all the things that are meaningful in his life are going to be taken away from him. He's going to lose his position in court. He's going to lose his military commission. He's going to lose his wife. He's going to lose his mentor. He's going to lose the priest. And ultimately, he's going to lose his self-respect. But along the way, God is making a king. So the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat are happening simultaneously. He's going to move from hero to zero and victor to victim, and at the same time go in the other direction. David lost his position in the court, and we already read that verse. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded, and David fled and escaped that night. He lost his wife and his home. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Well, he didn't figure that she really did love him. So Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, if you do not escape with your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. We don't know if Saul told Michal his plan. We don't know, women's intuition, if she figured it out. But she gives David great advice. If you don't get out of here, you're going to be dead. So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled away and escaped. Michal took an image, a household god. I do not understand how David allowed a household god in his house. None of the commentators are helping me out there. I've written to the rabbi and asked him what the rabbis think and haven't gotten a response yet. But Michal took an idol that was handy in the house and laid it on the bed and put a pillow of goat's hair at its head and covered it with the clothes. And I'm thinking, that must have been one ugly David in that bed. And then in my readings, I see this from the Song of Solomon. Your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. Now, if you know about the Song of Solomon, it's a love story, and you're not gonna say to your wife, you're gonna say, man, your hair is like goat hair. Those must have been pretty goats. So we've also read when David was introduced that he had beautiful eyes and that he was ruddy and that he was handsome, and that might as well go to the tip of his hair. So whatever kind of a wig she put on him, it was good looking, even though he's sick in bed. So David's going to be left down by a rope, no troops, no sword, no sling, no change of clothes, no food, and yet he's recognized by everybody because he's been saluted by everybody as he comes back from battle. He's now a fugitive. He lost his position in the court, and he lost his wife and his home. He's going to lose Samuel, his mentor. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naioth. Naioth is a beautiful place, and Ramah is high. So he's taken the high ground here. And it was told Saul, behold, David is at Naioth and Ramah. He's going to lose Jonathan as well. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and between your offspring. The Lord between us, not as a wedge, but as super glue, supernatural glue. And David rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. He lost his court, lost his military commission, lost his wife, his home, his mentor, and his best friend. And ultimately, he's going to lose his self-respect. We'll come back to chapter 21, but right now we're putting together all of the stepping down he's going through. And at the same time, God is taking away his support systems, his crutch. And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing that song stuck in our heads too? So Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. So Michal let him down through the window. He fled and he escaped. Now, we're going to do a little rabbit trail. The chronological Bible is going to, at this point, tie Psalms together with 1 Samuel. The chronological Bible starts with Genesis, ends with Revelation, but tries to put together, regardless of what the books say in the table of contents of your Bible, tries to put the happenings into chronological order. Now that's going to become very interesting when you start studying the Kings versus Chronicles. It's also especially interesting when you're studying the life of Jesus, because you've got all these parallel passages, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You got some things where John agrees, that's totally in agreement, but that John is also sharing that passage. But then there are sections where there's just John saying something. There are passages where Luke is doing chronological order and Matthew is not. And then when you think of what we call Holy Week, the week that Christ died, what are the steps that went through? And so that chronological Bible is particularly interesting. And in this particular case, we bring up Psalm 59. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me, in this case, Saul's soldiers. Deliver me from those who work evil and save me from bloodthirsty men. For behold, they lie in wait for my life. They were hanging around the house and he was up in bed. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine, they run and make ready. Notice he didn't say I'm innocent. What he said was, I didn't sin against those guys. So if you are interested in a chronological Bible, there are certain ways you can get it. You can buy one brand new on Amazon or a Christian bookstore. You can go to Biblio. I bought a copy of one there for $5. Or you can download an app called YouVersion. And the way YouVersion works is you go over to the App Store or Google Play Store or whatever, and you type in YouVersion, one word. Unfortunately, when it comes back, it doesn't say YouVersion. It says Bible and has the same icon as several other versions. So there are plenty of Bible versions out there. This particular one has certain reading plans, and one of them, when you click on the eyeglass that says search, you type the word chronological, and this is what you get, chronological. And you can see where that particular Bible reading plan has been over, they don't measure it beyond that, but over 100,000 people have gone through an entire year reading the Bible that way. So if you have a goal of reading the Bible through in a year, this is one way to do that, as opposed to simply starting at Genesis, making your way. You hit Leviticus and a lot of people just quit. But let's come back to the passage here. We've read that. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he's sick. And then Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him. He's got COVID. You don't want to go in that room. You don't have masks. You didn't have your vaccination. And Saul says, I don't care. If you don't want to kill him in bed, pick up the whole bed and I'll take care of him myself. And when the messengers came in, behold, the image was in the bed and the pillow of goat's hair at its head. And Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me thus and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped? And Michal answered Saul, here's where she threw David under the bus. He said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you? All this stuff started with Saul's anger. Now we're going to be touching on several lies here. And as you read through this stuff, you can't look at that as God's kind of hinting that you should start telling lies. She could just as easily have said to Dad, Dad, he's my husband. I love him. He may have put a sword through her. He may have just stepped aside, all totally frustrated. We don't know. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Saul went and lived at Naioth. And it was told Saul, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. And then Saul sent messengers. He's going to see 3 rounds. He's going to send messengers. And every time he sends messengers, they come towards this place, which is a school for the prophets. They're all getting together. And every one of them stops and they start prophesying. Be very similar to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane in John's version. And the soldiers come up and Jesus says, whom do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth. I am he. Boom. They all fell down 3 times. But now the 4th time, Saul's going to come himself. Then he himself went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Secu, defense. So God is at this point at David's defense. And he asked, Where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they're at the beautiful place in the high grounds. And he went there to that spot, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. And as he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth and Ramah. He prophesied once before. If we turn the clocks back, it was right around the time when he was first anointed that he prophesied. God is tickling his brain saying, don't you remember doing this once before? Don't you remember being close to Samuel? Don't you remember the glory of God and all the victories? But anger has blinded Saul's mind. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel and lay naked all day and all night. And that brings us to chapter 20. Then David fled from Naioth and Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, what have I done? What is my guilt? Notice he didn't say like he said to his big brother when they were about to face Goliath. He said, what have I done now? This is a totally different spirit. What have I done? What is my guilt? What is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? And Jonathan said to him, far from it, you shall not die. There's a bit of prophecy. Not die at the hand of Saul. David went the way of all the earth. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. What a relationship those two had, past tense. He did nothing without talking about it. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so. But David vowed again, saying, your father knows well that we have found favor with each other. Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. And that's an interesting picture. And for parents and grandparents, I want to bring up two books. The one is by Dr. Dobson, Bringing Up Boys. And in that book, he talks about males and females being wired totally differently, unlike today's culture. Boys and girls are different. And the very graphic example, he says, if there's something going on, a boy will do it because it's dangerous. And a girl will not do it because it's dangerous. And so, because he's a psychologist, I won't say it's a hard read. I'll say it's a slow read. You're not going to sit down one night and get through it. You're going to read a little bit and you're going to ruminate. That other book, She Calls Me Daddy, that's about obviously a daughter, and it's the father-daughter relationship from diapers to the wedding aisle. And if you say, oh man, my daughter's past all that, guess what? There's a sequel called She Still Calls Me Daddy. And it talks about from the wedding to the point where daughter is having a family of her own. So, a couple thoughts there. Then Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. And David said to Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at the table with the king. They celebrated a lunar calendar, and when it was the new moon, they would all get together. But let me go that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. And here's David suggesting that Jonathan tell a lie. That is not God's plan. If your father misses me at all, you don't have to say anything because you can tell from his countenance. You're close to your dad. You can tell if David's not there. Is Saul all peeved, or is he just, well, okay, I'm hungry, let's eat without him? If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says, good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt with me, kill me yourself. For why should you bring me to your father? And Jonathan said, far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, why wouldn't I tell you? We're BFFs. Then David said to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? And Jonathan said to David, come, let us go out into the field. So they both went out into the field, and Jonathan said to David, the Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day. Notice, David's going to be out in that field waiting for news, whether it's the first day or even all the way out to that third day. Behold, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send it your way, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you. The last time we heard that phrase, it was when Saul told David about to enter battle with Goliath, the Lord be with you. There was Saul, head and shoulders talking taller than all the other, and he was spewing out empty words. Here's Jonathan, anything but empty words. But the next phrase I think is really interesting. As he has been with my father. As we've gone through this narrative, I've continued to challenge to ask the question, was Saul lost or saved? If you believe you can lose your salvation, then right here is an indictment where Saul is saying, my dad was saved, but he lost his salvation. Now, I'm convinced that I, and you as well, if you've made a profession of faith, are eternally secure. So what does that mean? The Lord gave Saul several victories. He didn't do the Goliath thing, but as we went through the passage, he defeated all kinds of the enemies of Israel, and the Lord was with him and helped him. The Lord took his kingdom away from him, but if he was a saved man, then the Lord is still promising his salvation. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13. If we are faithless, yet he is faithful, he cannot deny himself. Again, part of the challenge as you're doing your own readings, which way does Saul fall? If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house either. When the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. We'll try to cover this in 6 minutes. David and the holy bread. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. The name Ahimelech means my brother is a king. And my brother is a king, and so is yours if you're saved. So Ahimelech is a good guy. And Ahimelech came to meet David trembling and said to him, why are you here alone and no one with you? And David said to Ahimelech, a big old fat lie. David could just as easily have spilled his guts like he did to Samuel. And then this also goes back to the question, what did Samuel tell David when he anointed him? Was it nothing? Did he whisper, David, you're going to be the next king? And depending upon what was actually said or not said, David has a certain mindset here. If David knew he was going to be the next king, he could very easily have said, now, this is what Saul is up against, and I'm destitute. Can you please help me? But that's not what was said. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here. Keep in mind, 5 is the number of grace or death. He was either going to get grace with some food to continue on, or he's going to fall into Saul's hands. And the priest answered David, I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread. The way that worked was there were 12 loaves that they baked once a week, once for each of the tribes. And those 12 loaves were in front of the Holy of Holies. And at the next week, the next 7-day cycle, they would bake another 12 loaves, swap them out. And the Levites were allowed to eat these first week-old 12 loaves. You know, we talk about day-old bread. Well, we have no idea how they baked their bread or how it was preserved, but they ate that bread. It was meant just for the Levites. David answered the priest, truly, women have been kept from us as always when I go on an expedition. He's continuing his lie. And my first pastor would say, if the devil can talk you into telling a little white lie, he can talk you into propping it up with a great big black one. And so he's continuing on this lie. The vessels of the young men are all holy, even when it is an ordinary journey. He didn't have any young men at that point. So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. Now, that particular passage is referred to in Matthew's gospel when the Pharisees attack Jesus and they say, you guys are taking the grain and you're harvesting at the Sabbath day and you didn't wash your hands. And Jesus' response was, if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Now let's picture those Levites. And I have been blessed to get very close to observant Jews. They take their religion very seriously. So here are these Levites. They're doing all right. They get 1/10 from every one of the other tribes. They get meat off the altar, and they also get this bread. And I consider the bread maybe almost a bonus. Now, if they thought of mercy instead of, I'm the only one who can eat this bread, Ahimelech may very well have given the bread without David going through this fantasy. Now, a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that same day, detained before the Lord. Another interesting phrase, and none of the commentators expand on it. Detained before the Lord. What are the chances? What are the options? First of all, if it was a Sabbath day, and it never tells us which day of the week this happened, if it was a Sabbath day, the priest could have said, Doeg, it's longer than a Sabbath day journey for you to go home, so you better just hang around until dusk, which means it's really the next day, then go home. It could have been that he was possibly have a sore, and he may have been examined by the high priest so that he can't go until they were sure. And if you read Leviticus chapter 13, you can read about the detention so they could see what happens to that particular sore. Knowing Doeg and what he's about to do, we don't think that he was detained there because he was doing a vow. Nonetheless, the Bible says he was detained before the Lord. And his name was Doeg, anxious or careful or weary, almost like a spy. And he was the Edomite. He was from the tribe that descended from Esau, as was Herod. He was the chief of Saul's herdsmen. Then David said to Ahimelech, then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I have brought neither my sword. Now he's starting to be honest. I've brought neither my sword nor my weapons. But then he tacks on a little bit of a lie because of the business. And the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, the valley of the curse, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is none but that here. And David said, there is none like it, give it to me. And what David did was he is trading in the slingshot of the Lord for the sword of the pagan. He's climbing down. He lost everything, But along the way, he's being prepared to be a king.